Hello, and if you're new to my channel, welcome. Now, my page Bone Rooms is all about the museums I've visited all over the world. And the museum we're visiting today has given me a chance to link in with another project I've been working on for a long time. My most recent book, released by Marcosi Publication, Horror, the first time America's paranoia infected the world. Now, this book is partly based around the 1950s war on the comic book industry, not just in the US, but all over the world. Horror and crime comics were big business at the time, and they were seen as a major reason for the sudden rise of juvenile delinquency in the years after World War II. And many governments all over the world took serious steps to remove these comics from the hands of children. So if you're into history, love comics, or just like a good story set in past times, similar, I guess, to Stand By Me or Stranger Things, well, Horror just might be the book for you. And you can check it out by clicking on one of the links below. Now, I've been living all over the world, and I actually got to spend some time in Chicago, and while I was there, I was lucky enough to head over to the east coast of the US, especially Seattle, where I caught up with the incredible Marvel display at MOPOP, the Museum of Pop Culture. The museum itself was actually founded by one of Microsoft's co-creators, and it was opened in 2000. And by looking at its history, it's gone through several changes and different names over the years. And it contains some amazing exhibits, and I'll post more about those exhibits I got to visit later. For example, there was a history of Star Trek, a history of science fiction, a horror prop display, and there was the Permanent Science Fiction Hall of Fame. And all of these held some astonishing things, and I'm really excited to show you. I'll show you those later. Now, I got to visit this a couple of years ago, and it looks like this exhibit closed at Seattle and has been on the road. And looking at it, it seems to have just left Chicago. So if you're a sci-fi fan or a comics fan, if you get the chance, I think you should go, and let me show you why. Okay, official blurb time. Marvel, Universe of Superheroes, celebrates Marvel history with more than 300 artifacts, including original comic book pages, sculptures, interactive displays, and costumes and props from Marvel's blockbuster films. Examine the origins of iconic characters such as Spider-Man, Black Panther, Hulk, and Captain Marvel, and see how they evolved alongside society over the past 80 years, making these characters a pop culture mainstay. Yeah, so I just took that straight off one of the websites. But that's pretty much what it is. It's got some amazing stuff in there. There's a lot of props from the movies, there's lots of things. But before we get into that, I just have to explain, normally in these exhibits, I would film myself walking through the exhibits, just behind the camera, talking about the things that we see. But this was a very noisy, there was a lot of people in this exhibit, and quite frankly, I was running out of memory. I had no memory in my camera. I'd been to this is probably the third museum on the day I'd been to. I just didn't have enough space, so I took photos instead of video. Now, I did take a little bit of video, and we'll see that at the end, but mostly this is going to be photos. And the other reason why I took the photos is I wanted to get some good photos. You know, I've got a lot of friends out there who are comic fans, and a lot of friends out there that may not get the chance to see these things. So I try to get some really nice close-up photos of the art so you can actually see some of the original artwork a lot better than if you just saw it online. So I took photos, and we're just going to walk through our photos right now. To begin with, I have to admit, I love the exhibit, and I was shocked down to my little booties just how truly important some of the material is on display. Whoever designed this exhibit clearly put in the time and effort, and they knew what they were doing because they got a lot of quality, not just quantity exhibits in. It is a traveling exhibit, and I will say it's not the best one to photograph. Everything is in a case, and the lighting can either be a little dark or way too intense. Also, there's an insane amount of interactive screens and videos playing everywhere, which that's great. You know, it's giving you the information that you need quite quickly, but it also creates numerous reflections wherever you try and stop and get a photo. So if some of these photos looks cropped or something, it's because there was a big glaring blue screen reflecting in the glass. As I walked through, I noticed quite a few photos. Now, I'm sure a lot of you out there are comic fans, and you've probably seen a lot of these photos of old kids in the 50s and 60s reading their comic books. I haven't actually seen a lot of these photos before, and I've done a lot of research into comics, so just seeing these photos, walking through this gallery, this wall-sized gallery of photos of kids reading comics, that's great. Never seen any of these before. And I will say, one of the first things that pops up is any display on comic history is of course going to carry something about the psychiatrist Dr. Frederick Wertham's attack on comics in the 1950s. And having written a book about this very subject, I was pleased to see it mentioned. But in a way, I was also a little bit surprised because Marvel, as a publisher, wasn't really publishing comics when Wortham was attacking comics. So they weren't really involved in the creation of the industry-wide standards, the censorship board called the CCA, or the Comics Code Authority. Now, if nobody out there knows what I'm talking about, if you read comics in the 70s or 80s, I'm sure you remember those weird little postage stamp symbols on the front, the cover of all your comics that had CCA in it. And basically, to stop the government from stepping in and imposing censorship on their industry, the comic industry itself created its own censorship board. And again, I won't go much more into it here because I happen to have written a book about this very thing, horror, and I may have mentioned it once or twice already, so maybe you want to read the book and learn more about it there. I will say Marvel was involved, however, in the ending of the CCA, especially Stan Lee. He decided he was having problems with some comics. He decided to publish these comics without the Comic Code Authority's permission, and that started to degrade it. So in a way, yes, I can see why they put it in there, because it's a very important part of Marvel becoming Marvel and Stan Lee becoming the man we know Stan Lee to be, or to have been. Now, as you walk through exhibit, it's kind of set out in a rough Marvel timeline, starting with the very first Marvel comics and the very first Marvel superheroes like the Human Torch, which isn't the Fantastic Four Human Torch, is an android that could catch fire, and Namor, the Submariner. And for comic fans, everybody knows Namor, and for those who are just Marvel movie fans, you have no idea who Namor is. I believe Namor is coming very soon. I think the Fantastic Four is coming out through Disney. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Namor's part of that, so you will soon learn who Namor is. But anyway, to have the original art from this time is astonishing. I can't imagine how it survived all this time, especially back then. Comic book pages, they weren't really cared for. They weren't seen as art. They were just seen as basically a nuisance, spider catchers hanging around in the office, and they were destroyed and thrown out. So to see this very original, very early artwork, quite amazing. And I'm going to say that's the reason to go to this exhibit, the original art. If you're a painting fan, you go to the Louvre to see Da Vinci's Mona Lisa. Well, if you go to this display, you'll be seeing our industry's greatest. Kirby, Ditko, these names that mean so much, Byrne, Colin, Miller, McFarlane, Romita. This display contains some of the most iconic images from comicdom on these walls. In fact, when I went through the Spider-Man display, I was astonished at how many early Spider-Man pages were there. And these were not just throwaway pages with nothing happening. The original art of some of these Spidey comics was some of the most important Spider-Man moments. For example, the death of Gwen Stacy. These are on display for you to get up close and personal with. I never imagined being able to see these, and there they are, right in front of me. I loved it. And I love that you can get closely. You can actually move right up, get as close as you want, and sometimes you can actually see the original working on the pages, the original pencils still there for everyone to see. Great stuff. Now, of course, we all know that Marvel and the Marvel movies have owned the cinema box office for the last decade. So yes, there's a lot of original costumes and props from these movies. And that's cool, and that'll bring in a lot of the people and help support these kind of exhibits. And great, but that's not really what I was there for. I was there to see the original art. And in fact, I will say, as a comic fan, this is a great idea. Because when all the families and the kids were moving through this exhibit, and they're going to rush straight over and look at the suits and the costumes and the props, and that leaves you all the more time to get as close and really inspect some of this astonishing original art. Now, I'm a huge Black Panther fan, have been since I was a kid. So seeing T'Challa highlighted here was great. But to me, thinking back on it now, this also suggests the timing of this display was being formed. Black Panther was a cultural high point at the time in the US. So the designers clearly wanted to focus on the importance of comicdom's first black superhero. And I was lucky enough to actually see Black Panther on the first day of its release. It was on my birthday in Chicago with a predominantly African-American audience. And that is one of my fondest memories, to see their reaction to that film and what that meant to them. That was just amazing. So yeah, I get it. And it's great to see it. But again, I never thought I'd see these original comic pages, and to get nice and close, amazing. As you go through, not all the pages are what I would say important pages either. Yes, there's some McFarlane Spider-Man pages, but it's not from the Amazing Spider-Man run. It's not 300 or anything like that. It's from the lesser known comics that he did, like Marvel Age covers and things like that. There's also a lot of advertising pieces that contain, Remember those old pages? There'd be most of the famous Marvel characters on the one page. They're all reaching for a Hostess fruit pie or something like that. There was quite a few of those sorts of pages. Didn't necessarily recognize them at the time, but I recognized what they were for. And still, you're getting to see this original art. That's pretty cool. Not so much the iconic pieces that would get you to the exhibit, but they're there and still good to see. Now, one of the great touches was from the creation of the Punisher. There was a series of original sketches showing how the character was formed and potentially the other names that they were thinking of, like the Executioner or the Grim Reaper. So it's cool to see these original sketches and then how the character evolved into that iconic Spider-Man cover of Punisher shooting at Spider-Man and how that was created and designed. And then you start stepping into something that I was quite astonished to see, which is a lot of the original Frank Miller art from Daredevil and from Wolverine. And again, we're talking about some of the most iconic Daredevil images out there. Bullseye stabbing of Elektra with her own sai. I never thought I'd get to see that page, and there it is, right in front of me. In fact, other than maybe the Bill Island Cartoon Museum, which I was lucky enough to get to, and I'll probably be doing a video about that very shortly, this has to be the greatest opportunity you will have to see some of the most important original artwork for yourself. And this is easily worth the price of admission. Now here we see I did manage to get a little bit of video, because when I walked through this display the first time, thinking on it I'd call it the Doctor Strange space display, it was just amazing to see, and a photo wasn't going to do it justice. In this display you have floor to ceiling videos, all at weird angles. They're all around you, they're behind you, they're in front of you. It's almost like a mirror maze of all these celestial space images from Ditko and Kirby swirling around your head. It's almost like being inside of a kaleidoscope. And it simply needs to be seen to be believed. Amazing stuff. I loved it. Got to stop saying amazing. And then moving through, suddenly it's over. You find yourself walking through the replica of an old dangerous street of New York where Luke Cage might be standing around the corner. Sweet Christmas. And then it's over. And you just want to head back in and see it all over again. Before I finish, I would like to point out that one of the features I did really enjoy was the life-size comic-style figures. Not movie figures, but these superheroes in their comic form that you get to stand by and get photos with throughout the display. And they create some really unique photo opportunities. I did try to get Lockjaw to teleport me. Sadly, nothing happened. Maybe next time I'll take in some Scooby snacks and kind of bribe him. So there you go. My take on the travelling Marvel exhibit, and it's really worth the effort. I think you should go and see it if you can. I think it's more than worthwhile if it's near you, and honestly, it's worth a little journey if it's in a neighbouring state. I do believe it's currently sitting in the fantastic Cozy display in downtown Columbus, Ohio, and again, Cozy is a museum that I've been to, and I will be posting a video about that later. So that's it. Feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. There are more videos coming, not just from the rest of MOPOP, but from the hundreds of other museums I've visited around the world. I also have my other channels on YouTube, including my history channel, where you can see a lot more videos about the history of comics, for example. And I've been finding some really amazing stuff about comic censorship all over the world, including Australia. And don't forget to look at my author page. I have books on comics. Recently I've just had a World War I murder mystery set in the trenches that have come out at the same time as horror, called Golgotha. So I'm sure I've got something that you might enjoy. And hopefully we'll be visiting another museum together real soon. Bye.